My name is Emilia, and I'm 42 years old. Every morning, I rise before the sun, pulling my white coat over weary shoulders, the badge of my years as a gastroenterologist pinned neatly above my heart. It's a job that demands precision, patience, and a soft, steady hand. All things I have cultivated over time. The hospital has been my second home for nearly 2 decades now. Its sterile halls and humming machines as familiar to me as the creak of my own bedroom floor. My husband, Leonard, is a good man. A kind soul with soft, graying hair and an even softer voice. But he is 60 now, and though I once found comfort in the wisdom of his years, time has stretched the distance between us. What once felt like a warm embrace now sometimes feels like a heavy, settled stillness. Dependable, yes, but so very still. Sometimes, when we sit together in the evenings, sipping our respective teas, the silence between us hums louder than any conversation. And then there is my son Adrian. Adrian, who is 24, who works in the very same hospital where I do. His name already spoken with respect in the hushed corners of the maternity ward. A gynecologist, young, brilliant, and disarmingly compassionate. Every time I see his white coat billow as he strides down the hallway, clipboard in hand, a quiet pride blooms in my chest so fiercely that it almost hurts. We work side by side, often crossing paths in the bustling corridors, exchanging a knowing glance or a small smile that says we are here, together in this. Sometimes, during lunch breaks, we steal moments away from the chaos, finding a quiet table in the farthest corner of the cafeteria. He talks about his patients, the young mothers who cry out of fear, the older ones who whisper their worries into his open hands. And I listen, heart full, knowing that his kindness has made him so loved here. Our bond is strong, closer than most. Perhaps too close by some standards, though I've long stopped caring about whispered judgments. Adrian and I have weathered storms together. Long nights during his studies when he doubted himself, the long and lonely years when Leonard's health scares began to keep him more at home and less by my side. It was only natural that Adrian would become my anchor, and me his. One evening, after a particularly grueling shift, I sat slumped in the staff lounge, my head in my hands. The cases had been difficult. A young woman with a perforated ulcer, an elderly man gasping through his final moments. Some days are harder than others, and this had been one of those days. I didn't hear Adrian approach until I felt the gentle touch of his hand on my shoulder. "Mom," he said softly. His voice was deeper now than it had been just a few years ago. Rich, soothing. "You're overworking yourself again." I looked up, meeting his gaze. Those familiar eyes, a mirror of my own, watched me with such concern that my throat tightened painfully. "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a smile. He crouched down so we were eye level. "You don't have to carry everything alone." Something in his voice, in his earnestness, cracked the tired armor I wore. Without thinking, I reached out, brushing a lock of his hair back, the way I used to when he was a child. His hair was soft between my fingers, and for a heartbeat, we simply stayed there, caught in a moment that felt heavier, deeper than mere comfort. He smiled at me, a small, private smile, as though we shared a secret the rest of the world couldn't quite understand. I withdrew my hand quickly, clearing my throat. "You're right. Maybe I do need a break." Adrian stood and offered me his hand. Without hesitation, I took it. His grip was firm and warm, another quiet reminder that he was no longer a boy. He had become a man, strong, steady, someone I could lean on without shame. The drive home that night was silent, but not uncomfortably so. Leonard was already asleep when we arrived, the house dark save for the dim kitchen light I always left on for him. Adrian and I shared a late snack, just toast and tea, standing side by side in the kitchen like two conspirators in the hush of the night. "Promise me you'll take it easy tomorrow," he said, his tone half playful, half serious. I laughed quietly. "I'll try." He leaned in and kissed my temple, a small, affectionate gesture that sent a warmth spiraling through me. I caught his hand briefly as he turned away, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," I whispered. He looked surprised but pleased. "For what?" "For still being here," I said. "For being you." He didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said everything. In that quiet kitchen, with the world asleep around us, the lines between mother and son blurred just a little. Not in a way that anyone could see or criticize, but in a way that lived deep in the marrow of who we were. Two people who had built their lives around each other, who knew each other's hearts better than anyone else ever could. It was a closeness that few understood. A bond so complete that it sometimes left me breathless. And perhaps, just perhaps, it was a bond that would change everything. It was late, and the hospital had settled into that strange hush that falls after the last round of evening medications are dispensed, after visitors have gone home. I had just finished signing off a particularly heavy case file when I heard a soft knock on the frame of my open office door. When I looked up, there he was. Adrian stood in the hallway, his white coat slung over one arm, his scrubs rumpled from a long shift. His face, though still handsome, carried the faint lines of exhaustion, and there was something else there too, a tightness around his mouth, a discomfort he couldn't quite hide. "Mom," he said quietly, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "Can I talk to you?" The vulnerability in his voice sent a jolt through me. I immediately rose from my chair, all the fatigue I felt evaporating in an instant. "What is it?" I asked, my heart already thudding. He hesitated, running a hand through his hair. "It's probably nothing. I've been having these stomach pains the last few days. It's getting worse." My professional instincts kicked in, but they tangled strangely with something far more primal, a fierce, aching need to protect him. "Where exactly does it hurt?" I asked, crossing the room to him without thinking. My hands hovered over his abdomen, not touching yet, but ready. He took my wrist gently and guided my hand to the spot just below his ribs. His touch was careful, almost reverent. I pressed softly, feeling the heat of him through the thin cotton of his scrubs. "Here," I murmured, my voice low. He nodded, watching my face intently. I fought to keep my expression neutral, though inwardly a storm raged. Part of me was worried, genuinely, profoundly worried. But another part of me, the part one rarely lets see the light of day, thrilled at how naturally he sought me out. How instinctively he leaned on me. "Any nausea?" "Yes. A little. Mostly after meals," he admitted. His voice had dropped too, the intimacy of the moment thick between us. I nodded slowly, fingertips brushing lightly across his side, feeling for any abnormal swelling or tension. Could be gastritis, or maybe something simpler like acid reflux. But we'll run tests, just to be safe. He smiled faintly. "You always know how to make me feel better." I caught his gaze then, and the air between us shifted again, the way it had in the lounge days before, the way it sometimes did when the world faded to just him and Em. I dropped my hand and stepped back, needing to put some space between us before the emotions swirling inside me took root somewhere dangerous. "You'll stay at the hospital tonight," I said briskly, masking my own shaking voice with clinical efficiency. "I'll arrange for the tests myself. It's better if you're monitored." He didn't argue. He only nodded, his trust in me so complete it made my chest ache. Hours later, after blood work and an ultrasound, after consults whispered between trusted colleagues under the cover of night, Adrian and I sat in the small recovery room reserved for observation patients. He was lying on the bed, the blanket pulled up to his waist, his head resting against the stiff hospital pillow. I sat beside him, one hand loosely cradling his wrist where the 4 lines snaked into his vein. Monitoring, comforting, watching over him. "You should go home and sleep," he said, though his hand curled slightly around mine, not wanting me to let go. I smiled and shook my head. "I'm exactly where I need to be." The monitors beeped softly in the background, the only other sound the gentle rain beginning to patter against the window. He shifted slightly toward me, his voice lower, roughened by tiredness and something else. "You're always taking care of me." "Of course," I said, smoothing his hair back gently, a gesture too familiar, too natural to resist. "You're my son." But as the words left my mouth, something within me twisted. Because the truth was that my feelings for Adrian had begun to stretch beyond the neat boundaries society so carefully drew. It wasn't a conscious choice. It was something deeper, something rooted in every stolen glance, every brush of his fingers against mine, every secret smile we shared over hospital meals and sleepless nights. I was ashamed of it. Deeply. Bitterly. And yet, I couldn't help it. He watched me with that same steady gaze. His eyes soft, as though he could see every shameful thought running through my head and understood them, even accepted them. "I'm lucky," he whispered. "So lucky to have you." I tightened my hand around his, blinking back tears that had no place here. "No," I said thickly. "I'm the lucky one." And in that small, sterile hospital room, in the half-light of a rain-washed night, I allowed myself, just for a moment, to lean into that closeness. To pretend that the world outside didn't exist. To pretend that love, in all its messy, complicated forms, was enough. I don't know how long we sat there in the dim room, the world outside the window slowly washing itself clean under the gentle rain. Inside, the sterile light of the monitor hummed softly, matching the strange, unsettled rhythm of my heart. Adrian stirred, breaking the stillness. "You've always been the one taking care of me," he said. His voice warm, a little hoarse with fatigue. His thumb brushed lightly against the inside of my wrist, right where my pulse beat wildly beneath the skin. "That's what mothers do," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He smiled, but there was something different about it. A quietness, a kind of reverence that sent a shiver down my spine. His hand tightened gently around mine, anchoring me to the moment. "But it's not fair," he said softly, his eyes searching mine. "You're always giving, always worrying, always carrying everything. And I just take." "You don't," I said quickly, my voice trembling slightly. "You've given me more than you realize." He shook his head, his brow furrowing, the rain catching in the reflection of his gaze. "It's my turn now." Before I could ask what he meant, he shifted up slightly on the bed, wincing just a little but determined. There was a new seriousness to his face, a decision made quietly in the space between two heartbeats. "Mom." He hesitated, as if weighing his words carefully. "You've been so busy taking care of everyone else, but when was the last time someone took care of you?" I opened my mouth to answer, to brush it off, to say something casual, but no words came. "I mean it," he pressed, his voice low and earnest. "You haven't even had a proper checkup in months, have you?" I felt heat creeping up my neck, guilt prickling at the base of my spine. He wasn't wrong. Between work, home, and everything in between, my own needs had always fallen to the bottom of the list. "You need to be taken care of too," he said, softer now. "And if you won't let anyone else do it, let me." I blinked at him, confused. He gave a shy, almost teasing smile then, boyish, but with an undertone that made my chest ache. "Come to my office tomorrow," he said. "I'll give you a full gynecological exam. You trust me, don't you?" The words hung in the air, too heavy, too charged. I stared at him, my throat suddenly dry, my hands going cold where they rested together in my lap. My pulse drummed loudly in my ears. Adrian, my son, my brilliant, kind, beautiful boy, was offering to care for me in the most intimate, vulnerable way possible. Professionally, respectfully. And yet, the very idea sent an unnameable thrill through me, tangled with guilt so sharp it nearly stole my breath. My voice cracked, so I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "I don't know if." "You don't have to say yes," he said quickly, squeezing my hand. "Only if you're comfortable. I want you to be okay. You take care of everyone else. Let someone take care of you for once." The sincerity in his voice was so raw, so unfiltered, that it left me dizzy. I nodded faintly, my mind a whirl of emotions I couldn't name. The rain tapped faster against the window pane, matching the frantic beat of my heart. "Tomorrow then," he said gently, as though sealing a sacred promise. And even as 1,000 warnings and doubts screamed in the back of my mind, another part of me, the part that had grown closer to him than it should have, whispered yes. The next morning dawned gray and heavy with clouds, the kind of day that made the hospital halls feel even more cavernous and cold. I spent too long getting ready, longer than I should have. I stood before the mirror in the staff locker room, smoothing my hair, adjusting the soft cotton of my blouse, then undoing it and redoing it again. My hands shook slightly, betraying the nerves I couldn't quite silence. It's just an exam, I told myself, a routine checkup. Nothing more. And yet, the thought of lying there on Adrian's examination table, vulnerable under his gaze, sent a slow, relentless heat crawling through my body. By the time I knocked softly on his office door, my heart was hammering so loudly that I was certain he could hear it through the wood. "Come in," came his voice, low and familiar. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. His office was warm, softly lit, not clinical and cold but welcoming. Adrian stood by the counter, adjusting the files neatly stacked there. When he turned and saw me, his face broke into a gentle smile, one that made my knees feel unsteady. "You made it," he said simply. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat was too dry, my nerves too raw. He approached slowly, with that same carefulness he used with his patients, that steady, calming presence that could soothe even the most anxious soul. But today I was beyond soothing. "I can tell you're nervous," he said, almost in a whisper, as though speaking too loudly might shatter me into pieces. I swallowed hard, looking away, ashamed of how tense I felt. Adrian stepped closer, his voice even softer. "Would it help if you didn't have to see anything?" I blinked up at him, confused. He smiled again, reassuring, understanding, and held up a soft blindfold, the kind used sometimes for particularly anxious patients. "You can focus just on your breathing," he said, his voice barely more than breath. "Let yourself relax. Trust me." My whole body trembled, but slowly I nodded. He approached carefully, gently tying the fabric behind my head. Darkness embraced me immediately, heightening every other sense, the faint scent of antiseptic, the whisper of his movements, the comforting warmth of the room. I lay back on the exam table, my hands resting lightly on my sides, trying to slow my racing heart. "You're doing so well," Adrian murmured from somewhere beside me. His hands, gloved, professional, gentle, began their careful work. He spoke softly as he examined me, telling me every step, asking if I was comfortable, never rushing, never making me feel exposed or ashamed. At first, every touch sent a jolt through me, not from pain but from sheer awareness. His fingers were warm even through the gloves, sure and careful, moving with a tenderness that felt almost reverent. "You're okay," he whispered as he worked, his voice a lifeline in the darkness. Gradually, impossibly, I began to relax. My body softened into the table, the tension draining slowly from my muscles. The embarrassment ebbed away, replaced by something deeper, a quiet, overwhelming trust that anchored me to the moment. The examination lasted longer than any I had ever had before, not because he was careless, but because he was thorough, meticulous, attentive to every detail of my health and comfort. When he finally finished, he removed his gloves with a soft snap and rested his hand lightly on my forearm. "One more thing," he said quietly. "You're holding a lot of tension, a lot of pressure. It's not good for you." I barely nodded, still floating somewhere between awareness and dream. "You need a massage," he said, and though his words were clinical, there was a warmth there that made me shiver. I heard him move around the room, the sound of a bottle being opened, the faint scent of lavender oil filling the air. When his hands touched my shoulders, bare now, exposed and vulnerable, I gasped softly. His touch was firm but impossibly tender, kneading the tight knots of muscle with slow, deliberate strokes. "You're safe," he whispered, his hands gliding over my back, my arms, my waist, every movement measured and full of care. The warmth of his palms seeped into me, unlocking something deep and hidden, something I hadn't even realized I had locked away inside myself for so long. Every knot he untangled, every place he soothed, sent me spiraling deeper into a place where nothing existed but sensation, Safety, comfort, release. And then, without warning, something inside me broke free. A soft, helpless sound escaped me, something between a gasp and a sob, as the tension, the longing, the ache I had carried for months, maybe years, reached its peak. I felt the tears slip from beneath the blindfold, silent and unstoppable. Adrian was immediately there, his hands stilling, his voice low and urgent. "It's okay," he whispered. "Let go. You're okay." And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I did. I let go, completely, utterly, safe in the hands of the boy I had raised, the man who had become the center of my world. The peak passed slowly, leaving me trembling, shattered, but somehow lighter, freer. He wiped the tears from my cheeks gently, the blindfold still shielding me from everything but the sound of his voice and the warmth of his touch. "You're safe," he murmured again. "I've got you, Mom. I'll always have you." And in that moment, I believed him with every broken, beating piece of my heart.